I think when I was young, when I was a teenager, I loved to travel. I had an obsession with traveling, and I think that the camera became a sort of passport, a way to explore the world and to try to understand the world that I hadn't grown up with. That's where my passion began. It sort of took me to different cultures, to different peoples, and to different places. And that's always been with me, that sense of sort of adventure and of walking and of exploring. And the camera was a mechanism for that from a very early age. I'm Stuart Franklin. Magnum had an enormous role in my life and work. I mean, I've been with Magnum for nearly 30 years. There's an awful lot of time, and it's kind of a family, and it's a cooperative. Magnum began in 1947 really to try to sort of promote the idea that we, the photographers, own our own copyright. We own our own work, and that's very important. Apart from that, I think there was a great sort of collegiate, and there still is, collegiate atmosphere in Magnum. We share a lot, we're quite critical, we look, and even at our annual meeting at the end of the year, you know, we quite often show work to other people and talk about it, and I think the feedback is formidable. We had a very sort of charismatic editorial director in Magnum in New York, Bob Danin, and he and I remember having quite a few discussions about the sort of emerging situation in China, and it was quite clear to anybody who knew anything of Chinese history that to oppose the government in the way that the students and workers were at that time was pretty significant news. It was very unusual. You know, this is a very homogeneous, cohesive society, and so something must have been badly wrong for, you know, some of the brightest and best of that society to gather in Tiananmen Square and oppose the regime through demonstrations and then a hunger strike and so forth. So Bob Dan in Magnum asked me to go and to try to cover the news. And I started really to try to capture the story as it unfolded in its different ways. And every day was different. I mean, one day I would go to the university where they were printing pamphlets. Another day I would go and look at, a small demonstration being prepared somewhere else, a Statue of Liberty and so on and so forth. So there are many sort of aspects to the story, but the nearer we got to June the 3rd, 4th, the more the atmosphere changed. When I arrived in Beijing, it was more like sort of a little bit like a rock festival in atmosphere. They were playing the Marseillaise, singing, there was a lot of music, but at the same time there was, a hunger strike going on the side of the square. But then more and more soldiers arrived and the situation became more and more tense and uncertain. There were rumors flying around about the Chinese army or various elements of the Chinese army opposing other elements and so on, and sort of the sense that eventually people would be cleared from the square. So the days went on and I photographed and tried to send pictures back to Paris. I suppose the most instructive were the work I did during the 1983-84 famine, where in Sudan and Ethiopia, where I really understood how difficult it was to communicate the very complex crisis that was happening in Africa at that time using photography. It was very tough to it's all very well to take one photograph that tells the story about somebody suffering from famine. It's much harder to tell a bigger story about why a famine is happening, what's happening there. There was no shortage of food in the Horn of Africa at that time, but it was all being diverted to the Ethiopian army at the time. How can you tell that story coherently as a photographer? So I sort of had to deal with challenges like that. I think the other thing I learned in covering war is that I'm not this kind of brave, courageous photojournalist as many of my colleagues at the time were. I just got very, very scared in quite difficult situations. It is awful, to put yourself in harm's way in that way, and a lot of my colleagues were just extraordinarily tough and brave. I also learned that a lot of the most powerful images of conflict come not from the front line, not from being at the front line, but perhaps being a few feet back, a few meters back, and looking at how the women and children are coping, how the families are coping, how people are coping at a time generally of tragedy.
北高联常委并且北大、人大、北师大、清华的领队同学于7点30分前到联席会议接待处。北高联常委请到纪念碑东北角联席会议接待站集合，并现在刮风了，请大家不要乱，把自己帐篷都支好了，不要让它。
I went back to the hotel and stayed for a few hours in the hotel. By that time, the bottom level, the lobby of the hotel, had been taken over by the sort of Chinese internal security people, and they were sort of searching for cameras, and it generally became very difficult to work after that, and in fact impossible to leave the hotel. So the following morning, I found myself stuck really in my room, wondering when there was going to be a knock on the door, and a whole bunch of people asking for film, asking for the cameras and so on. But anyway, we found a balcony and started to photograph the sort of movement of the tanks coming out of the square from the balcony, which wasn't very satisfactory. We would much rather been down on the street, but we couldn't get out. And I tried to sort of photograph everything as it happened. There was a row of students facing off a row of soldiers at one point, probably at about 9 o'clock in the morning. They were dispersed, and then the tanks sort of forced their way through the students down towards almost just below my balcony where I was photographing. And then, as you say, this lone protester jumped out from the crowd and started remonstrating with the tank driver, climbed on top of the tank, came back down with his shopping bag in images that everybody's seen. I felt at the time that it wasn't very powerful as a photograph. I felt we'd always grown up with the view, I think it was Robert Capa's quote that if a picture isn't good enough, you're not close enough, and I felt a long way away. And I have these sort of strong memories of the famous pictures of the Prague Spring, of the Russian tanks coming in and so on and so forth. So I was a long way away trying to capture what I felt was a significant event. I did manage to do that later in the morning. We went out, we got away, and we visited a couple of hospitals. But so what I did was I photographed the scene as I saw it, the demonstrator coming out, arguing with the tank driver, being sort of taken to the other side of the street by his colleagues, and then the tanks carrying on, moving forward. So that's how that sort of morning happened. I think that our physical relationship with other people in society, with from our very earliest beginnings in the womb to being babies and young children, moments that most of us have completely forgotten, but our brains haven't forgotten them. Our subconscious hasn't forgotten the kind of our engagement with each other, with our parents, with siblings if we have them. And I think that very sort of physical connection informs a lot of the way we work, and certainly informs the way I photograph. I've recently been working a lot in landscape, and one of the sort of interests for me is to why I'm interested in particular aspects of the landscape, why I abstract in particular ways. I think Merleau-Ponty said once, we see the world through the spectacles of memory. And I think that almost everything I see comes or experience or get excited about, it piques some kind of memory in me in some way. And that might just be a line, some form in the landscape might be the form of, a face or an arm or something. But I think we find these reminders of our memory quite comforting and interesting.
So, how's it going? fine, so looking a little bit too contrasty, so I'm taking the grade down just to get a bit more tonality in.
Well, luckily you printed this one before.
Yeah, for exhibition. So let's just do the beginning. One.
Out in the cold North Sea. It's been a glorious day out there.
What, today? Oh God, yeah.
5 degrees.
So when was this taken again? This was quite some time ago.
1987, I think.
Yeah? And this was a sort of corporate job, or?
Yeah, it was a calendar for an oil company.
Of course, the other thing is you're shooting on film, and so there's no preview. Okay, so just a little bit burning in on the left-hand side. The atmosphere, the sort of mist sort of coming off.
You've worked that really well, as ever.
But,
fantastic. Yeah.
You didn't get as far as going in yourself, did you?
How's that looking?
I think, well, you should never judge under red light, but I think it might just need just a bit more density.
Yeah, it's working. It's a lovely print. Well, at least it looks well. Get the lights on.
You're never allowed to judge under red light.
No.
Lights.
Okie dokie. What do we got here? Yeah, that's good, isn't it?
It's looking good.
And the Edinburgh stuff looks so good on the wall. A contact sheet, literally speaking, is when you put, a strip of negatives in contact with a piece of photographic paper, burn the light through the negatives onto the paper. That's, it's the strict order of a roll of film. I took a much sort of broader view of what a contact sheet should be, and that is really a sort of more or less narrative sequence of photographs around the particular event, which was the protester jumping in front of the tanks. So the whole contact sheet traces, the journey of the tanks down from the square. You can see the square, you can see the line of protesters, and then you can see the events as we know at the end. Television killed photojournalism in the print journalism sense of the word, virtually. I mean, it's still, on life support, but it's basically sort of dead, in my view. So I suppose what television killed to some degree was the photo essay, the long run of photographs. And what we're talking just now about is the single photograph of a man defying the row of tanks. I've said in many interviews before that it was television that made that photograph, if it is iconic. It was television that sort of got people engaged with that sort of ballade, if you like, in front of the tanks. And, it became symbolic. The still photograph, the photograph I took and 2 or 3 other people took, became almost a sort of a souvenir from the television footage. It became a symbolic thing, because I think what we always have tried to do, anybody that's photographed in the news is very complicated, is to sort of crystallize in one photograph something essential about the event or the day and so on. And I think what really drove it to become, if you like, a famous photograph was the initial coverage it got on television. The BBC were in the building, I think CNN were in the building. I can't remember which crews were there, French TV. But and then I remember Magnum ringing me and saying, "Did you get this or that?" And yes, I got that photograph. I'm interested as a photographer in capturing the relationship between man and nature. Man is part of an evolving, changing species. Homo sapiens, changing all the time. Probably I see mankind as becoming more and more sort of powerful in determining the future of the planet in perhaps a way that didn't exist 500 years ago. So I suppose, you know, it is within our power how the planet will continue to sustain itself. So The Time of Trees was the first book I published, and it started in Malaysia, and I went to Sarawak, you know, half of Borneo if you like, and I was just completely shocked by the extent of rainforest destruction. I took light planes up into the sky, and I could see that where even the Malays were saying there was forest, there was none. It had been felled, and you could hear and see it all around you. And at the back end of that, people were suffering from flooding, from all kinds of problems caused by the rainforest destruction. So I wanted to sort of continue to look at what man and nature. I'd been fortunate in that during my sort of 15 or 20 years of working with National Geographic, I'd done a number of urban stories, some on mega cities, some on smaller cities, and so on and so forth, that I was able to sort of piece together this jigsaw, or at least answer in certain ways this question, you know. And I think my conclusion was that cities are, you know, are positive things, and for us, for humans, they are sites of opportunity and also for invention, you know, and for innovation. You know, a lot of the things that we create and innovate are made in cities. So I've always held that view that people are always trying to better their circumstances.